others who are not able to join us but still want to benefit from our conversation. All right, so we're going to get started with that. So again, now that it's recording, welcome to our 411 meeting. We're going to go ahead and start. As others come in, please feel free to list what one of your favorite comfort foods has been during shelter in place in the chat box. Add your school to your name. If you don't know how to do that, you just hover over your image and there's 3 dots, and you can, when you click on that, you'll see rename, and you can just add your school name there. Okay, so before we get started with the content of our meeting, I wanted to let you know about some of the upcoming 411 meetings that we have. Right now we're planning to do them weekly until we run out of topics that are relevant to all of you. So next week is exciting. We've got a town hall with the San Francisco Department of Public Health. This will have interpretation in both Chinese and Spanish, and so be sure to share that with your communities. We'd love to have as many people as possible coming. There have been some new reports and new data coming out, and so we'll have them come and present and also answer questions, and you can submit your questions ahead of time like normal in the registration link. On September 2nd, we're going to have a presentation of a few ballot measures that the PTA is considering endorsing on the November ballot. The Vote 16 measure, the parcel tax for SFUSD, and then we also had a recent request to consider one that will have an impact on childcare funding, and so we're looking at that. That might be added to that group. And there's I sent an email out to all of the PTA presidents so you understand what our process is for taking positions on ballot measures as PTAs. As you all know, we're an advocacy organization, and we do have a process by which we can take positions on issues only, never candidates, only on issues. And when we look at the resolutions that members across the state have passed at convention, those are our highest authority, and we have position statements and policies. You can find all of those on the capta.org website, and those are what we look at. So if there's interest and there's enough to back up taking a position on a certain issue, then we can, and we can present it to our members who vote. It's not just the PTA board at the district level or at your own school who makes that decision. It's a membership vote. And then if the members agree, then we can move forward, and then every PTA in San Francisco can act on behalf of the PTA in supporting whatever that issue is if they'd like to. They're not forced to ever, but that gives them the ability to do so. So that's going to happen on September 2nd. On September 9th, we have a guest speaker who's a coach coming in to talk about managing stress during the pandemic. And she's coming specifically to talk about parent stress and how to help us all manage balancing the things we're having to balance between work and at-home learning for our kids, and just helping us reset expectations for ourselves and redefine success. And I've asked her to help us make sure everybody can come away with a couple of things at the end of that meeting that are actionable. So it wasn't just a nice inspirational time, but actually everybody can walk away with there's something that new that they can do the next day that might help. And that, just to note, is going to be an 1.5 hour long workshop. So it's not just an hour long. So come join us for that. And then on September 16th, we're going to be doing a meeting about PTA fundraising, and we will be looking to those of you who may have some great ideas on how you're thinking about that. In fact, as we move through these 411 meetings, we're going to be reaching out to lots of folks in our school PTAs, because we'd love to have you help us present on these topics, because we know there's a lot of expertise around this district, and it's we have experience on the district board, and we're here to support you, but we know there's a lot of good ideas even outside of our board. So let us know if you're ever interested in helping with that, or you have other ideas. We did a poll at the end of June or the beginning of June on ideas for these, and so I'm still pulling topics from that list, but if you have other ideas, just send them over. We'd love to consider them. So, okay, so tonight, the main bulk of this meeting is how to run inclusive PTA meetings. You are going to hear the district PTA talking a bit in the near future about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some work we're starting to do. So stay tuned on that. And so this is sort of a very light kind of intro to some of that about being inclusive in our PTA meetings. And we're all in a challenging situation where we're doing everything virtually and we can't bring our whole community together in person. And so we have to be extra thoughtful about how we're making sure everyone is included, not just brought to a space or told, about something happening, but they actually are included and their voices are heard and that their leadership is welcomed, so that there's no one who's left out, and the decisions that are made, the topics you're covering, the support you provide as a PTA is really representative of the community that you are in. So that is sort of what's behind this idea of running inclusive PTA meetings. And you saw in the invitation, these general objectives is providing equitable access, making sure that everybody can get the information and they can participate in meetings, and considering what all of that means, these new formats we have to do instead of just in-person or analog formats through flyers and Wednesday envelopes or otherwise, how to provide interpretation and translation support to your PTA meetings and generally with your PTA communications, how to plan with your families and learn what topics would be valuable to them. And I say families because that's often where our PTAs get centered, but it's also our educators and our students, right? Because we have lots of PTSAs around the city as well. And those are partners also. And so seeing what would be valuable to them in these meetings and how to connect with our communities while we're in this situation. And hopefully we learn some great things coming out of this that we can incorporate into the future workings of PTA, even after this year is over. And I have no idea, right? None of us have any idea if how we're operating this year will have any impact also on next year, because we just don't know. We don't get to control the virus, so we're doing our best. So I wanted to just start here with how we're communicating. And again, just I want to let you know, I cannot, the way I have the screen set up in the recording is I cannot see your faces or your hands raised. And so if you have a question or something you'd like to add, we're a small enough group. Please just go ahead and unmute yourself and just jump in, and that's great. I don't mind that at all. And then you can also, if you want to put something in the chat box, I can also see it there. Okay, so how you're communicating. We've had some conversations about this in our recent meetings, figuring out how you can communicate with your families. There's been a lot of questions about, can PTAs get email lists from the school, and which they can't just get a school list. It has to be sort of an opt-in situation, but how you can work with your administration at your school to figure that out. So the questions that I wanted to bring up here were, have you determined how your PTA can communicate with families? Will it be through emails? Will it be through robocalls that the principal can set up? Will it be through a text messaging program? Do you have apps that your families use, that your PTA uses to communicate with families already? What is the format that has worked in the past? And how are you thinking about making sure everybody's receiving information if there are people who have not opted in the past? And so that leads to the second question, is how to coordinate it with administration and classroom teachers, because our administration and school staff generally do have the contact information for families, and they need to be communicating with them because that's part of state law, is to have participation by all students. And so there is some way. And so it's really critical for us all to be partnering with our administration to figure out that initial contact. And of course, anybody can opt in or opt out, but that's a great place to start. And then, have you figured out how to translate or interpret communications? So those are some questions to be thinking of. Yeah, and I'm going to just read some of these chats. I know that everybody might be able to see them, but if they have people on the phone, they may not see the chats quite as easily. Thanks, Deborah. WeChat is great for Cantonese-speaking parents. And one of the tips that I've had from folks are just start with Google Translate for the documents you're trying to translate, the communications that you're putting out. And then if you can find somebody a volunteer to just review what you've originally translated in that way, it can make it faster for them to just get through it and make sure that it's a translation that has some integrity. I know that 10, 15 years ago when I was trying to do some translation that way for our school. It was not good, but the quality has really improved. So I think this is a good place to start if you don't have volunteers who can help. And this is also something you can budget for in your PTA if you have the funds. It's a good thing to prioritize, frankly, is getting some translation help if you don't have parent volunteers who can help you with that, or people on your school staff. All right, so considering the place and time for your meetings. Do all of your families have access to high-speed internet? This is another topic that I think we're going to have to communicate with our administration about. All of our students are supposed to have access to internet because that's how they're doing school now. And so I hope that it's going to be easier for us to communicate with families because that is more of a possibility, but we all know that that wasn't a complete, it didn't happen for all of our families across the district. It's something that they're still working on. And if they had internet, some of it was unsteady. And so that's still in process. So I think we have got to check in with administration at all the schools to figure out what's the situation of our families so we make sure we don't leave anybody out. You probably already know the language needs of your community. And so that's related to the first question that I asked, the first slide. Figuring out how you need to, what languages you need to get communications out in for the meetings, and how you're going to provide translation and interpretation, which we'll talk more about in a little while. And then what are family schedules like? This is probably similar to what family schedules are before, but many people aren't commuting anymore, not going into a workplace, but many are. And so how can you figure out the best time to be having meetings? It could be that a lunch hour is a really good time, or maybe you're going to provide notice for your meetings, because generally you know that your PTA meeting times are set in your bylaws and described there, but you can always set a different meeting time any given month. You just have to give proper notice for it. So it could be that it's a good idea to try a few different times during the fall to see what works best for people: lunchtime, evening, mornings. And also, as Melissa is saying here, if you schedule at different times, you might be able to include different communities. So I know that I've seen teachers more likely to participate if it's right after school instead of in the evening. And so that could be an option, but that's hard for lots of folks. So maybe you alternate or do multiple meetings in a month to cover the different timing needs that folks have. And then the biggest goal you have here, of course, is how you can include the highest number of and the most representative group of families. So not just having large turnout, but asking yourself questions like, who's not coming? Who's not participating, and can we figure out why they're not participating, and then try to solve that need. And it's going to take, it can be really high touch, but if you can involve lots of folks, leaders in your school, if you can work with, if you have ELAC, the English Learner Advisory Council leaders, if you have site council leaders, the principal, other staff who can help outreach to find out why some people aren't participating. And of course, it's okay if they don't want to, but we don't want to make anybody feel left out or not aware of what opportunities there are to connect, because we know that relationship building and connecting with people right now is critical. So many people are feeling isolated, and so the more we can build community, especially at the beginning of the year, is really important. So the new place, we're not in person, so there are a few options for places to hold your meetings. We obviously have been doing our district PTA meetings on Zoom. Google Meet is another option. It's free. GoToMeetings, Slack. I don't know if anybody has a PTA who's on Slack. I'd be really impressed if somebody's got a Slack workspace for their PTA. I use it for work. It's a really great app, and you can do video calls and lots of different things through that. But I'd be curious if any PTAs are using it. And then there's also conference calls. If you find that the accessibility of a video call for your school is not great, you can do a conference call. And there's a website, or there's just a service called freeconferencecall.net that you can get a free conference call number. I've had one for 10 years now, I think, the same number, and it's free, and you can record the meetings. There are a lot of ways you can use that too. Video is great because it's nice to see people, but it is not necessary. You can do the free conference call if that's a good option for you. Okay. I wanted to just throw out a few, just so you could see a little bit what options are, like what the possibilities are with some of um, these different apps. So the Google Meet, for instance, there's these, what I have listed here that, you know, that they have in their edition, the different editions you can choose from: basic, business, enterprise. Right now through, I think through the end of September, the basic membership you can have up to 250, but I think that by September 30th that's supposed to end and it'll be back to 100. And so, and for free. And so I have also seen, and I was just going to let you know, because it sounds, one of the benefits of using Zoom is that you have these breakout rooms, and it sounds like that you can also, let me just tell you, in Google Meet, there's an ability to create multiple rooms by making multiple calendar entries, and then you can just post who is in which room. So there is still a way to do kind of breakout rooms. And I think one thing we're seeing in classrooms, but also in general meetings, maybe you've experienced this in your work, that small groups make it feel a little more like community. People are more likely to speak up. And so you can set up meetings that are a general push out of information, like the whole group together, and then you can always break people up into smaller groups for brainstorming, for connecting, even if you want to start with icebreakers at the beginning of a meeting where people can talk to other people across their grade or across the school, just a chance to connect with each other. It's I think a really good way to build community, but that option is available, having those sort of breakout situations for Google Meet as well as Zoom. And then this is the Zoom options. If you all haven't signed up for one, the basic meetings that are free, you can have up to a 40-minute limit, which is a little short for a PTA meeting. But if you can have unlimited duration meetings with the Pro account. That is $14.99 a month. Again, it's an allowable expense and much cheaper than renting a space somewhere else in normal in-person times. But you can do that, and then there's additions you can have. A second district PTA has the large meeting version where you can have up to 500 people signed up, and that's an additional $40 to this. And you can have up to 1,000 people, which I wouldn't imagine many of us need that many, and for another $40. There's also an option within these to add a webinar option where you just see one big screen and there isn't the chat dialogue. And that is $40 on top of the regular Pro account. So again, $55 for Pro. And you have to decide whether you want to do a webinar or meetings. Second District PTA has purposely chosen to organize all these 411 meetings in a meeting format versus a webinar, because we want people to see each other and to feel connected to each other. That's one of our goals. As you may remember, when we started these in the spring, we wanted to provide information to help you all do your jobs. And we also wanted to help you connect with other people. And so seeing other people's faces, even if it's just their name and not their actual faces, it makes people feel a little less isolated. And I suspect that might be true in your own schools, but it's up to you what works best for you. But I wanted to share that. And then talking about logistics, if you haven't run some of these virtual meetings as a PTA yet, some of the things to think about is we find that having multiple people helping with the logistics end of things is really great. So having people who can manage the chat, the tech, making sure that you're getting it set up on time. We always have a couple people who are helping bring people in from the waiting room, because we have the waiting room set up so that we don't have any Zoom bombers. So we have, there's several of us on the board that'll play different roles in making sure that the meeting goes smoothly. And it's great also, if you're PTAs, you can rotate responsibilities. So if anybody's taking notes or doing certain things, there's some people who may really like what they're doing, but giving a chance for people to rotate through is also fun and important, I think. Question, do any of these teleconference options have the option to wander through the different breakout rooms? The video, Zoom, you can wander through breakout rooms. I don't know about the Google Meet if you can wander through breakout rooms. If anybody else does, then weigh in here. I don't know if that's possible, but with Zoom, you can definitely, if you're the host, you can pop around to breakout rooms as much as you want. The host, Nancy, can the host wander in Google Meet or Zoom?
I have not tried to break out in Google Meet.
Oh, participants. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah,
Sorry, keep going, Nancy.
What I was going to say about Zoom is that in Zoom the hosts can wander, and then if for participants, what they can do is leave and go back to the main room, and then in the main room the host can then put you into a different breakout room. But you don't wander, you have to go back to the main room is the way I understand it.
That is true. So whenever I've run the breakout rooms, the one thing is if somebody leaves their breakout room, they can't get reassigned back to that breakout room. The breakout room will, the system thinks that they are done and they don't want to go back to it. And so you can only reassign them to a different one. They can't go back to their original one unless they log out completely, and then they can come back in. That's happened lots of times when I've been running breakout rooms. So, but participants can't just wander around. There's a really interesting platform, actually. I didn't think about it when I was putting this together, but it is sort of like it looks like a low tech, how would I describe it? It's sort of like well, I'll just describe what it looks like. On your screen, you see a blueprint of a room, and then everybody who's in the meeting is like a little character. And you can wander through the room. And so if you are in one place in the room, you can hear everybody who's around you. And if you walk away from the person who is talking, the sound actually gets softer, and you can join other conversations in the room, even though you're all in the same room. On your screen in the little blueprint, you can see I'm all in, say, like a little living room. But if you walk over to a group of people, you can hear just them and have a conversation with them, and the fade sounds from where you were just standing. And I'm forgetting the name of it. And I was in a meeting with it once. It was more of like a social kind of hour with it, and it was kind of fascinating. And so if you have a smaller group of people, that could be something. I'll look up the name of it and share it with you. But that could be something that is a little bit more social, where people can kind of wander and just join whatever group they want without having to worry about breakout rooms. I don't know how effective it would be for actually leading a PTA meeting, but if you wanted to host, say, a principal coffee or just more of a social hour, leading up to a meeting, that could be a good option. So I'll look that up and send it out to you all with the notes. Because it was kind of an interesting thing. Also important is to test the tech. So if you're new to any of these platforms, make sure that you test it out before you do it with a big meeting. You can do it with your board, so it's okay to make mistakes. When I was running a meeting, not a PTA meeting, that I was doing tech where we had to sync with SF.gov, like the TV, and we were doing Facebook Live, and we were doing a bunch of things, and we had a couple of tech testing days just to make sure that it really worked before we did the live thing. So give yourself room and space so you're not stressed out by how well it's going to work. Make sure you publish agenda ahead of time. So just like your normal PTA meetings where you need to publish the agenda, you need to publish the reports people need to vote on, all of those things, you still need to do that. If you do it by email, great. Whatever format you're going to be communicating with your community in, publish your agenda in that way. You'll see this link here, and I'll send these slides out to you tomorrow, but this CAPTA link has a great set of resources around running meetings during COVID. It tells you all of the guidelines. It tells you how to deal with voting. It tells you how to deal with elections. Everything is in that link. So if you're just trying to remind yourself what needs to be done before you have a meeting that has action items that members need to vote on, look at this link. Some of the meetings you may want to have shareable notes. If you all remember, let's see a couple of weeks ago, we had one of these meetings, and we had kind of a shared Google Doc where people were putting their notes from their breakout rooms. You could have shareable notes like that if you're going to break out your your PTA members into groups for brainstorming activities, for instance, to try to figure out what they're interested in hearing at PTA meetings, so they want to come and it feels relevant to them. You could have somebody who's in charge of putting those together and sharing those out. But dividing up the work certainly makes for a lighter load, and it gives a lot of people opportunity for leadership. Make sure those logistics are really smooth. I have a couple of links around sort of logistics and how to run virtual meetings that I will include that are in the notes for this this slide deck that you'll see when I share this deck with you. So interpretation and translation. This has been a big thing that I've been trying to figure out for us. You all saw in the PTA President listserv, we sent around an FAQ that SFUSD, the translation department, put together about how to support PTAs in virtual meetings and how that will work and how to submit requests. They set up a Google Meet number where so you would have, for instance, if you had a Zoom meeting, the interpreters would be part of that, and they would give an announcement in the languages that they're providing interpretation for, and then they would have people who need those languages call into a different number, and then and they could watch the meeting, and they just are using the audio from the Google Meet. So that's generally how it works, but the FAQ is linked here if you want to figure out how that works and what the process is for that. And then also there's been some talk about using Zoom for interpretation, and I have, let's see, oh yeah, okay, Melissa's on here. I asked Melissa, who I've been talking to about a bunch of these things lately, and I know has put up good resources on the listservs also, to talk a little bit about Zoom interpretation features and how to use that, because she's tried that. So Melissa, do you want to talk about it for a minute?
Yeah, I was actually just saw that Gina Morris, who's our new Marina Middle School PTSA president, I know she's been actually looking into that even more for our school. I was hoping she could speak to that.
Okay, well, Melissa Carvajal is on here, and she was going to talk about.
Okay, excellent. I remember that you said that, Melissa, and I just texted to Gina also to ask her, but
yeah, if Gina has ideas too, let's hear all the ideas people have. Let's share them all. So why don't we start with Melissa Carvajal, and then anybody else who has ideas on this too, please join in, jump in.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. I'm unfortunately limited by technology because I tried to sort of set up a Zoom meeting with interpretation, but to show you, but it didn't work. But I will tell you that in the basic pro division plan, there is, if you pick the webinar add-on for $40, that includes an interpretation channel. And we've used this channel, and it's really great. And I'm actually really surprised that the district isn't using it yet. I guess everybody is catching up. But what it does is down next to reactions will be another channel that says interpretation. And then when you touch it, it will show what languages are available. You can have as many interpretation channels as you want. So what actually happens is that you assign an interpreter, and that's part of the advanced options on meetings when you set up the Zoom meeting. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay. The only strange thing is you can't use your own Zoom meeting ID. But besides that, so if you follow the settings, you can set up that interpretation, and then the interpreter has their own, let's say, channel. They'll be able to hear the speaker and then simultaneously interpret for the people who need that language. And for the people that are listening, they're able to see, and they could even hear a little bit of what everybody else is saying. So it's not silent. So you get a little bit of the feel for the people that are speaking, and you get to hear like you do at a meeting when you have those headphones on. That's basically what it imitates. It creates a separate channel.
And it was something like, I feel like I read, Melissa, that it's like a 20% volume for the original speaker and then 80% or something for the interpreter. So it's just much louder for the interpretation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so, so it's like a channel, like listening to a different radio channel or something like that. Do they have a separate room? Are there breakout rooms? Or like, if you want to do breakout rooms, how does that work with interpretation? Do you know?
I don't think you can probably interpret on the breakout rooms, but I don't know. I mean, you could probably have the translator, who I just also want to mention, you need to invite them and assign them ahead of time. And you can actually get on early with them if they're also assigned as an alternative host. An interpreter, you could do it this way. An interpreter could join the breakout room and that channel would still continue. It would still have because the interpreter's channel is linked to their email and their sign-in.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you just assign them to a breakout room, because one of the things that I've been considering even for us is if we have a separate breakout room that is for, like, for instance, for Spanish language speakers can be in one breakout room with their, and so that would work because the interpreter, wherever they go is what they, wherever they are, the interpretation is happening. So if they've got folks with them, that should work.
Yeah, I mean, I really encourage people to check this out. The idea that we interpret by somebody talking and then someone else talking is really long.
Yeah.
And it really loses people's interest. And also, it is interesting for people to mix with each other. So if you actually have good interpretation, so that when a Spanish, when a Spanish speaker is speaking, I think you'd have to have another channel for that. So, yeah, I think it's from English to Spanish, and then you'd probably have to have another. I don't know actually about that point. I'm not sure whether the translator can sort of switch.
So the way that they do, for instance, at public comment, if any of you have gone to a board meeting before, if there is public comment, usually they do. So that Melissa's talking about their simultaneous, interpretation that does less time consuming because it's happening at the same time. But if at a public comment at a board meeting, if you have somebody who is monolingual, who comes forward to give public comment, then they have consecutive interpretations, where the interpreter will come up and listen to them and then interpret it into English so that everybody else in the room can hear. So do you not know if that kind of, because that seems like that would be a shift in functionality for that to happen.
I think what we did in our meeting is when our interpreter wanted to speak English, she just switched her channel to the channel of everybody. So that worked. It's clunky. There might be another way to do it, but that worked pretty well.
Okay. Great. Since you have used this, does anybody want to ask Melissa questions about this? If you don't want to, that's okay. I'm trying to ask questions I can think of that you all would have, but if you have questions, just unmute yourself and ask, since she's tried this out. And it's good because I think that we were thinking originally that you had to have the professional version of Zoom that's like $200 a month, and so it's great that it's you only have to have the webinar version, which is not terribly expensive.
But I am running my own individual campaign on Twitter. So please retweet my tweet, as Michelle did, and a lot of the California PTA tweeted. Like, Zoom, just give us this. Stop charging us for it. We're trying to do education in a pandemic, and we're working with parents all over the state and the country.
Right.
So far, they haven't agreed, but
and especially in California, where there's so many students whose families, speak another language. It's just it's crazy. They haven't responded at all, right? I haven't seen them respond to that tweet.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And I encourage everybody to I know it's hard and challenging, but I really encourage people to check it out and try to offer that, because I think it really makes our meetings inclusive, and attracts people that might stay away otherwise. And it's so easy to get people now to come. I really encourage you to take advantage of it. So it's on the Pro, and it's an add-on, and then you can sort of work your way into getting directions on how to use it. And I'm happy. I'll put my email down here, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or later if you want to use it.
Thank you, Melissa. That's really helpful. But you sign up for the webinar. If you're in a Pro account, you sign up for the webinar, and then within the webinar, there's already included in that the interpretation feature.
You enable interpretation. Yeah, you
Okay.
basically check a box.
Gina is asking if they can do a demo with you.
Sure. I'm not ready now, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to help. Gina, if you just get a hold of me, or we can do it with this group. I'm happy to do it as well. I just have to set it up right.
Yeah, and it's actually really tricky. When you do screen shares with Zoom meetings, it's hard to do a screen share to show how, because you can't do a screen share of a meeting while you're running a meeting. And so it's sort of tricky to figure that out. So I think we'd have to kind of test how to let people see how to set it up. Right, Melissa, we'll have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, that was sort of my technical difficulty.
Yeah.
Trying to do that, and then I went off Zoom because.
Yeah, so we'll see if we can figure that out if people want to do that. But yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I would echo and wonder if you all have found the same thing, that the participation in meetings since we've moved away from in-site school has actually been increased for us. Certainly the people coming to our district meetings has increased, and I've heard that from a lot of school sites and other organizations. Actually, even like the teachers union has told me that their participation is really increased. Small groups of teachers that normally maybe all of the librarians come together, for different meetings to plan together, and they used to be very small, but now that it's virtual, they're seeing tons of participation. So it really has enabled a lot of people to participate in more ways, and we just want to make sure that everyone can actually participate. So it is challenging to figure out this interpretation and translation part. I certainly have been spending a lot of time trying to figure that out for us so that we can make sure our meetings are all, and you see this one is not interpreted, but we will next week. And I'm hoping that all of our meetings going forward for the district PTA 411s will have interpretation available. So yeah, so we'll try to figure that out. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the Google Meet, you can do this. This is how the school district is doing it. They're setting up these Google Meet numbers, or you can set up conference call if you don't want to use Google Meet, if you don't have Google accounts. That's a way to have people be able to see video in whichever way you're choosing to provide video, if that's Zoom or some other way of those other formats that I shared on the other slide. You can set up other conference call lines or things for interpreters. I don't know if any of you all do this, but we certainly are posting these meetings on YouTube, and I've been trying to figure out the closed caption and how to make sure that even if we've provided interpretation in the meeting, how people who are viewing the meeting later can still have the material and content translated or interpreted. And because the Google Meet, the way the school district does it, like they provide interpretation for the board meetings, but it's not recorded. So if you go back to listen to it later, you're sort of out of luck. And so there is an article that I found that I think is maybe going to work. I've been trying kind of off and on for a few weeks to try to figure out how to have the closed caption but interpreted or translated into Spanish or Chinese. And I found a good guideline on how to do that. It does take, there's a few steps involved, but it is possible, and it is possible to do for free. You don't have to pay. And so I'll share that link. You'll see the link, actually, it's in the notes of these slides. There's also a website called rev.com. It's not cheap to do translation this way, but it's fast. I work for KQED. It's a public media company here, and we use rev.com all the time for our for getting transcripts of interviews that our reporters do. And so it's a really easy thing to use, but it does cost money. And if you have budget, you can do that. But I know everybody's also tight on their budget. So I'm trying to find as many free options and low cost options as possible for all of us. But that is an option you can use. And then, as we mentioned earlier, if you want to start with Google Translation, you can do that for any of the communications you're putting out, and then just send that over to someone who does speak the language, who can look and see if there's some integrity in the translation, that it actually feels like it's representing the meaning of whatever it is you're trying to communicate. I'm trying to put together a list of volunteers to help with interpretation into Chinese and Spanish. If there's anybody in your schools who's are willing to help with that at the district level, let me know, because I'd love to see if we could do a mix of both paid and volunteer. But you can also look for yourselves, also try to amass the same sort of a list.
Quick interruption.
Yeah,
With respect to Google Translate,
Mhm.
I've been working with the district in trying to redo the my son's former elementary school's website, and they note that if you are using Google Translate and you don't have a parent or somebody that can review the translation, that you make the notation in the documentation that this was translated by Google Translate, so that then they know if it's not 100% accurate, that it's not because you were possibly offending somebody by making an attempt, but that you were using Google Translate, so that they understand that it might not be a pure and accurate translation, but hopefully that they are able to at least gain the gist of the content that you are trying to share.
Great, thanks for that, Sharon.
I have another contribution that came from a different PTA, which is, and this also speaks to inclusion in another way, is co-hosting with another group. And if there is a DLAC, an ELAC, an English Language Advisory Committee, or a for instance, a Latino PAC at your school, instead of calling it a PTA meeting, call it a co-hosted meeting, co-hosted by the PTA and the ELAC, and work with the leader of the other group in the school, and just work on the agenda for that, because the parents want to, the interest in connecting is there, and if there is a strong group that is language specific, that's not English language, to work with them more closely, to host a meeting together on topics that are of interest to your school, can be a way of bringing people together.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's a great idea. Okay, I'm going to move on. There's just, I think I've got just a couple of slides left, and then I wanted to just leave a little bit of time for everybody to, we don't have a huge group of people, but we can just split up into groups for a little bit to talk about ideas as they come up. And so this next one, I think this is the right order, is about the actual meeting content. Right now, always, I think these are generally good rules of thumb for planning your meeting content, but especially right now as we're trying so hard to build community and connect people. And that's to make your content relevant. Try to keep the business part of your meeting as short as possible, so that you're providing the value that will help people get through this time, have the resources they need, the information they need, to feel connected to each other. Be really transparent with how you're making decisions. Let them know if they're new parents to your school community, let them know how the PTA makes decisions, how the board recommends content. Let them have some input into what these topics are. Let them know just generally how you're making decisions, and who's part of that, and planning with. And so what I was thinking about, and I would love to hear from you, and maybe people can talk about this in their breakouts, is planning with community and not necessarily for community. And that is, I think there's a number of ways that we can all solicit ideas and opinions. And as we talked about at the beginning, the ways that you're communicating with people in your community, that's going to be key to how you're getting input on what the content of your meeting needs to be like. So reaching out, whose voices are you not seeing? Who's not participating? There's certain grade levels or certain people with different groups of folks who maybe your Cantonese, monolingual Cantonese families are not participating. So how can you do that? Working with your ELAC, or is it working with some staff? Sometimes it's a matter of just translating materials, and sometimes it's something else. And so kind of getting to the bottom of how you make sure that different voices are included in planning what it is that you're going to do with your time. So soliciting through surveys is helpful, through phone calls are great, through texts, through having kind of phone trees is great. If you have a room parent situation set up in your schools already, I don't know how all of the elementary schools especially are handling that, but if you have that, people can call through lists. I think just as we're seeing the wellness checks in our schools happen when they're most effective when somebody who knows the family is calling the family to say, hey, how are you? What do you need? Our PTAs can work in similar fashions. So if we're able to get information, if people are willing to opt in, and you can start with a robocall that solicits people's interest in being part of a communication group. But room parents could call or divide it up among a few people to say, hey, we just wanted to check in and see what's interested. What do you need right now? Like how can the PTA support your family as we're going through this? What topics do you want to learn about? Or is it not coming to a meeting? Is there some other way that we can all partner together during this time? It is more time consuming to do phone calls and individual outreach, but my experience is that it is so worth it. The relationships that are built when you do that, and the real authentic connection and ideas you get are really different and worth it. So if people are able to just kind of divide up work to do that, then I think you'll see some value in that. And then the last thing with this, just invite. I have also experienced so many times over the years that you need to just ask people, invite them to help, invite them to participate. What kind of expertise might they have, or what kind of ideas do they have? Can they, would they like to present on a topic? Would they like to be one of the facilitators in the meeting, or to help with tech, or to just be part of it in some way? There are so many jobs to be done with our PTAs and with the PTA meetings, that the more we can divide up that work, the more it's going to feel like there's a shared ownership and an inclusive feeling. So no need for us all to take on everything on our own. Divide up the work and give people lots of small jobs so that it really is a collective effort getting things done. You could also set up, small ad hoc subcommittees. You could have a meeting topic subcommittee and pull somebody from every grade level, or, from different, get a handful of people together who are going to tackle a certain aspect you're trying to do, a certain component of the engagement you're trying to do with community. So people could work virtually with a few others in addressing some of the goals that you all might establish are important at your schools. So just asking people, including them, and letting them, inviting them to just be part of planning. So setting an inclusive tone. So beginning of the meetings, we've all been talking about this community building thing. And so one of the things you've seen that we've been doing at the beginning of our meetings is to have an opening screen. It's just usually just a slide, a Google slide that we have set up that invites you all to rename yourselves with your schools if you'd like to add your pronouns, things like that. What we did tonight, an icebreaker, what can help just build a little more connection at the beginning of a meeting as you're entering in a virtual space. And welcoming and appreciating people, just saying, we're really glad you're here. Thank you for whatever the thing you're going to thank them for. That is important. And then when people are speaking, if you end up doing video meetings, there's always going to be people who are audio only for whatever reason. They might be calling from their phones. They might not want to be on screen. That's fine. Making sure that people don't feel the pressure to do that. But because there might be people who are just listening, if we can remind each other to say our names right before we speak so that the people who are on the phone don't feel completely lost and they're also feeling connected to community. You can also set meeting norms. And so at the beginning of the year, in your first PTA meeting, perhaps even in, as you're laying out your agenda for a meeting, listing that we want to make sure that there's not only some voices that are heard, that it's not just the loudest voices who are used to speaking often, you know, the step up, step back kind of ideas, that there are no bad ideas, that there's all ideas are, you know, they're just brainstorms and we'll all work, you know, there's a whole list of kind of meeting norms you can find online. We've used some of them in PTA. We can send those around if you don't have access to any of those, but just something that establishes we're all here with good intentions and we want everybody to feel comfortable participating. We want to figure out how to do that. They're setting those expectations before your meetings. You could actually go around the group and do introductions if you want. In a big group, you can. It is pretty time consuming if you do that, but maybe it's worth it at the beginning of the year to do that for you. Or putting in people into smaller rooms, like breakout groups, to do introductions and make it feel a little more personable is great. We already talked about different roles. And the one benefit I would also add that if you find different roles for people in your meetings, you're also setting the stage for building new pipelines of leadership. And we always in PTA should be thinking about who's going to replace me. When I'm done, I need to help build a pipeline of people who can come next, and helping people see that we need them and they have a lot of value to offer to us and that they're good at this. And so people won't build that confidence and interest if we don't make sure that there's a wide open space for them to step into those kinds of roles. And so by inviting people to participate in small ways, you're also setting up some leadership pipelines. This last, I think this is the last thing, is just these virtual settings are hard to take the pulse of what's happening sometimes. The breakout rooms are great. There's a lot of nonverbal communication functions, like you can raise your hand, there's thumbs up, thumbs down. There's the reactions, you know, where you see at the bottom of your screen, you can do the clap hands or the raise hand. I've also seen some suggestions lately where they said, how about we get people actually, if they have their videos on, that you do like jazz hands or like snapping if you agree with something, or, you know, when people really love something, they do like the heart. I have my meetings at work, we have people who are doing a lot of that stuff sometimes, and it makes it feel a little more alive. You could decide to do some of those. You can also do polls, and you can do post-meeting surveys. And this is something I was reminded as I was thinking about this meeting. We used to do this a lot, do these post-meeting surveys just to see, like, did we plan something that was actually valuable to people or was it not? And to get feedback. And it's so easy now with Google Forms that you can do surveys, and you could do something that is just, you know, 3 or 4 questions. You could post the link in the chat at the end of a meeting and say, this will take you 2 minutes to fill out. I'm going to post it here. Go do it now. And then, you know, we'll see you next time. Doing a survey would be great. And there are also some great poll websites, like apps and things like that. And I wanted to show you one actually. And I'll log out of here. I'll say this part and then I want to show you this poll function. I think what's really important for us, all of us, as we're moving through this next year, is to just be ready to learn and iterate. So as you get feedback, be ready to change. Like, nothing has to be permanent. Do what you can, do your best, get feedback on it, see what worked, then move on to, then evolve and try something new. And then as long as you're in a constant state of being willing to learn and open to learn, it's gonna be okay and you're gonna have a good year. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this screen because I wanna show you this. All right. Okay, there's some people leaving. All right, do we still have enough people to move into? Okay, we still got people. Let me show you this. Okay, I already got this going. Okay, so this is polleverywhere.com. It literally takes 2 minutes to sign up for. And so this is something you could use to take polls in your meetings. This is, if you go to, you can do it 2 ways. You can either go to pollev.com/MichellePark469, or you can just text just put like the number in your text is 22333, and then you text Michelle Park 469, and then you answer this. And answer this question: how's your first week of school going? So if you all want to go ahead and do this, you'll be able to just text like, how's the first week going? And you'll see it all show up in a word cloud. So I'll let you all do that right now. Let's see, why is it not showing up? Oh, this is, I wonder why they're not showing up. My daughter and I tested this earlier and it worked just fine. Have other people texted in responses and they're not showing? It's not just mine that's not showing up?
Yeah, I got the message that says your presenter, Michelle Parker, has not opened a poll yet. Try again.
Oh, that's so weird.
When they try again when they have activated a poll.
Oh, that's, it was activated. All right, let's see.
And then mine says it can't accept any of the words, like it doesn't recognize.
All right, well, there you go. I was like, I tested this out. So that's very funny that I tested it out and it didn't work and I activated it and everything. All right, let me just, exactly, be ready to learn and iterate. All right, let me just try this really fast and see, because I thought that I activated it, but I will just check while you are all on. We're learning together, and we'll see how it works. And why did it not? All right, I don't want to waste all of your time. What I will tell you is that it was really easy to set up, and my daughter and I tested it and it actually worked really easily and well. It wasn't hard at all, but for whatever reason, I switched computers. That could be it. So let me see. Yeah, so I'll send you the link how to sign up, but it's really easy to use and it did work. It did work before, but I'm using a different computer than when I signed it up. So so forget that for now. And let me just check in with you all, because we've gone an hour already. And we said that we would stop at 8:30. Do people want to get into breakout rooms at all? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to see if people want to for 10 minutes just to connect. Then let's do it. And if people are like, nope, this is it, and I'm done for my evening, why don't you, if you'd like to do a breakout room, raise your hand, the little blue hand next to your name. And that way, if it's not too many people, then we can have just a few people hang out and still meet. And if everybody wants to, then we'll break out. Okay, I see. Okay, there's a couple. Okay, here's what we'll do, because I think most people need to go off and get their kids to bed. Those who would like to stay around, stick around, and we'll just do a conversation here for a few minutes with those who want to stay. And then those who need to go on to the rest of their day, then can go on to the rest of the day, and we'll send this recording out tomorrow or by Friday for sure. So let's do that. And just in closing, So the rest of you can go. Just thank you so much for making the time. I hope your first week at school has gone well, and please let us know what you are struggling with, what you need help with, so that we can plan more of these meetings and just more resources for you as you're moving through the beginning of this year. I know it's really complicated, and you're all doing such a good job. So let us know. Thank you. And next week, please do come to the Public Health Department Town Hall. There, like I said, there will be interpretation. I'll make sure that we have the description that we already sent out, but we'll also translate that description for you to send out to your communities. And we'll record it, of course, but I hope you can join us for the upcoming 411 meetings. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.